Welcome to another podcast episode of the Main Character Complex podcast. Today we'll be talking about My Fabulous Lucy Corran Feyne from Marvel. This is part 2, I suppose, although it doesn't really matter what order you watch any Corran backstory podcasts, except probably the main one first, and then all the other ones, it doesn't really matter what order. If you don't know, Corran is my Marvel OC, and she's got a very complex backstory. So I've got another podcast on this channel that's already up that discusses her backstory already. It's just her origin story, powers, character stuff, all the way until Infinity War. So not Phase 5, but now any podcast that comes after that has to do with her, it's just me talking about Phase 5 involvement, including, Multiverse of Madness, all the other TV shows, and this one it has the Loki TV show. And her involvement in the TVA. So her made-up name is the Reaper because she was a dubious bad guy, but then she ended up getting the made-up name Quantum Star when she became a good guy, I suppose, if that's how you want to put it. Her alien species, just really quickly, is a Shudian, so that's the made-up species they made, which is like a half reptilian, half human, and her powers are electromagnetism and manipulation, and she's pretty powerful. But she is contained by the power of magic, if that's how you want to put it. Again, this is just TDR for the main podcast episode. Again, I recommend you go quickly look at that, or go quickly read the Toy House that will be linked in the description of her backstory, but that's basically it. During the point of the TVA, her overseer is Clint, so this is during the 5-year period between Infinity War and Endgame. So the Corran that is part of the TVA, it gets a bit confusing, but there are 3 Corrans involved. So the canon Corran, right, in the canon timeline of the Corranverse, she gets interrupted by the TVA. So this is obviously when a timeline gets interrupted, the TVA agents come in and reset the universe. But yeah, basically between the 5 years between Infinity War and Endgame would be when this occurs, because that's when Barton, Hawkeye, is her overseer, so the person who controls her powers, and controls her, essentially. So she's on a mission with Clint, an infiltration mission. It's just like entering a building, whatever. But basically at one point she accidentally slips and is distracted for a solid second, which means that they get attacked by these guards in the infiltration mission. And that's not supposed to happen in the canon timeline, and it ends up causing a domino effect for all of these sort of things to happen. So the moment that she does get distracted and trips over is the moment that the TVA marks the point, and the TVA come and it's like, hey, bestie, you messed up, let's reset the universe. So that's kind of what happens. So she trips, and then the TVA kind of appear. So during the fight against these guards, during the infiltration mission gone wrong, the TVA haven't arrived yet. Clint is knocked out by accident, and so Corran takes out the rest of the guards. It's not that hard, and then she just kind of has to sit around and try to wake Clint up, because she can't really do anything else except wake Clint up, because again, he's overseer, so she can't really do anything, and also she kind of needs permission. So and then the TVA do arrive, and then they're like, hey, come with us. But locally, obviously she just resists, and she's like, bestie, I'm not leaving my master, okay? And Clint is knocked out, so he can't come. And she's about to attack them because technically they're a threat, and any threat she can fight them. But then they begin forcefully trying to bring her in. So again, that warrants her allowing to fight them without an actual direct order from Clint. And she is basically about to fight them, but then one of the soldiers use the baton to freeze her, so she gets frozen. Her powers technically should be able to manipulate this, so she wouldn't be affected by the time frozen thing. But she doesn't do it in this current moment because, first of all, she's surprised and confused. She doesn't realize that these people can do this sort of thing. And secondly, also, Clint hasn't technically authorized this type of power usage. So she gets frozen, and she's question mark. And in those few moments, the soldiers manage to put a TVA collar on her and take her to the TVA facilities. So once she's there, she needs to return to Clint because her primary instinct and rule of the curse that controls her is to defend her overseer. So she jumps back through the portal that hasn't disappeared yet, and back to Clint, but then is immediately pulled back because of the collar, just in time to see the reset charge detonate. So the bomb thing they put there to reset the area, And then she thinks that obviously that's a bad thing and she has to look after Clint because that's her primary objective. But she's obviously annoyed that she's been pulled back with a collar. So she tries to disconnect the collar from her, and because it is electronic, she should be able to manipulate it. So she uses the magic. And all the Minutemen, the soldiers, are all really surprised because obviously you can't use magic in the TVA. She's like, Bestie, what? I can use magic. So she uses magic and then she teleports with her own powers out of the TVA. But before she does that, she attempts to teleport, but then one of the soldiers tried to use the baton to try and stop her and freeze it. But this time, Corran actually uses her powers to disable the baton so it doesn't work on her and then snap it in half with magic. And so all the Minutemen are like surprised, like, Bestie, you're not supposed to be able to use your powers, ? What's going on? And they've already alerted Rainslayer to come and help with this anomaly because it's not supposed to happen. So then she goes back to the location with Clint, so she teleports back. But as she's about to like teleport back, like while she's mid a wormhole, right, like mid teleportation, something goes wrong, and so she finds herself in the same location where Clint was, right, in the mission where the mission went wrong, but like no one's there. And she's like, what's going on? Why isn't anyone here? I teleported back to the same place, But almost immediately the portal opens and Renslayer and Mobius, who was with Rainslayer at the time, so she was summoned, so that's why he's here. And some soldiers come through, and then Corran asks them what the hell happened and where the hell is Clint? And she's threatening them with a sword at Renslayer's throat, and she's like, where the hell is he, Bessie? What did you do with him? But then Renslayer calmly replies, and she's just like explaining the reset charge and how the reset charge works, and that she, Corran, is a variant. Corran isn't able to have time to reply because Mobius butts in, who's a fangirl of Corran, actually, expressing the fact that only one other Corran variant has ever been recorded, since her obedience in the sacred timeline is almost perfect due to the isolation of Sudra, which is almost like the apocalypse flaw that's in the TV show, where you can hide in an apocalypse, because since very like mistakes that happen from the sacred timeline that happen on Sidra can go unrecorded because of how long it takes for Sidra to be freed again, because Sidra is isolated. Because of that, she actually doesn't have that many variants, and also because of the curse, because she doesn't actually have that much free will. It is up to other people to make sure that she stays, aligned with the sacred timeline. So because of that, there are only one other variant, I'm pretty sure, of Corran that has visited TVA, which is a slip up that Corran did in 2012, which happened immediately after the convergence incident, when she escaped Shijia for the very first time. But then she had to be eliminated essentially then and there because she was really dangerous, because she accidentally used her powers for the first time and is unstable, which is like the whole first arc of her backstory. So because of that, Mobius is very like a fangirl, because it's like we've literally never seen an actual other Corran variant, and you're the first one. And since she is a main player in the sacred timeline, plus like her perfect track record of variants, she's like a kind of like a minor celebrity in the TVA because of that. So Mobius starts talking, but then Corran repeats a question on like where the hell Clint is, because I have to be looking after him, and what the hell is going on? And Renslayer basically analyzes and just kind of hypothesized that, somehow she tried to teleport back to the location that she teleported from to get to the TVA. But she would also need to, because she was teleported into the TVA, and she's trying to teleport out of the TVA, she would also need to know the time and date to appear at said location as well, which will require time travel. So basically Corran only had the location and not the time as well, since they were in the TVA. If that makes any sense? And so Corran had actually just teleported them to the location that she'd been intercepted at, but a whole century later by accident, since she didn't know that she needed to, insert like a premeditated date to arrive at, which is to find the time that she was taken away from. If that makes any sense. This is actually something that Corran can and has done, but future her, because again, this is Corran in between Endgame and Infinity War, but in post Endgame Corran, so current Corran basically in the Corranverse, is able to time travel through her powers with quantum manipulation, which is part of electromagnetism manipulation. But the Corran that is currently being intercepted by the TVA, which is like past Corran, doesn't know about that yet. But yes, so that theory ends up being correct. Renslayer and the TVA are confused, worried, and concerned, and very, very interested in the fact that Corran is able to bypass the TVA's no magic barriers, as well as being able to time travel with such ease without the device, such as the pin particles or a temp pad. But then after some thinking, they realize that it's because she no longer has an overseer, and her powers are no longer limited and restricted. Because when she has an overseer with the curse, it restricts her powers, so she can't actually use them unless her overseer lets her. But then again, the curse also doesn't let her use certain elements of her power because they are too powerful, and she'll either get too worn out because it's using too much power, or she will not be able to control them, and it will overwhelm her, and then it will destroy a planet, which is what happens in arc 1 of her backstory with Suja. But now because Clint isn't there, and she's now disconnected from reality, she has no restrictions, so the curse isn't actually on her anymore. And so that's why she is able to teleport out of the TVA, therefore time travel out of the TVA into a location. So she starts freaking out because she doesn't have an overseer, and she does have a fear, she has PTSD basically of repeating the traumatic event that destroyed her homeworld, Sidra, and being overpowered beyond control. There is a lot of this theme is also explored in Multiverse of Madness. So she's very scared of not having an overseer and stuff like that, which is why, again, in the end of Infinity War, she has the choice of getting rid of the curse because they have the Infinity Stones, but she chooses not to, and instead to transfer the overseer power from Clint to Doctor Strange because she's too afraid to be able to have free will and to be able to try and control her powers, which scare her. So the fact that she doesn't have an overseer now freaks her out. So she argues with Mobius and Renslayer about the ability to control powers and demands to get an overseer assigned somehow because she's paranoid, and she has self-esteem issues regarding her worth and autonomy because she hasn't had worth or autonomy in so many years. Clint was the first one to actually give her that. Renslayer and Mobius, they're very curious about this sort of thing, and they discuss and they think that then they decide to prove to her that she can control her powers. Now she's just being overdramatic. So they convince her that they can use one of the Infinity Stones that they have to transfer the curse to someone. So they're trying to reassure her, hey, we can give you an overseer, it's fine, but they're actually going to trick her. So she isn't convinced she can wield the Infinity Stones though, because again, this is before Endgame, and in Endgame she is able to wield the Infinity Stones, but right now she doesn't know that she can, and she's scared, obviously. So Mobius shows a reel of her life, kind of like what Loki sees in the show, and shows her being able to use the Power Stone to transfer the curse to Doctor Strange from Clint as canon in the Corranverse, as I said, so to prove that she can actually use the Infinity Stone. So she's like, okay, let's do it. Let's give myself an overseer. So Mobius, a Minute Soldier, and Corran go to a remote planet with a Power Stone, and she does it to agree, and they agree that Mobius can be her overseer. So just as the Minute Soldier is about to pass the stone to Corran, Mobius uses a baton to slow the soldier down by accident. Remember, they actually trying to trick her to show that she can use her powers. So Corran fumbles and causes the Infinity Stone to drop. And remember, if an Infinity Stone touches a planet, as we've seen in Guardians of the Galaxy, the planet explodes. So she isn't fast enough to catch it, and so the stone hits the planet floor, and the planet starts to implode. And the process is really fast. The planet will explode really fast, but the event is slowed down. So imagine the scene in slow motion because just imagine the scene in slowed down because it happens really fast, but Corran just reacts really fast. But she reacts and she immediately starts absorbing the power from the explosion, so from the planet's floor reaction and the stone, and she basically freezes the stone as it begins to sink into the planet, which is disintegrating. And she manages to reverse time slightly so it doesn't hit the ground, as well as absorbing the energy that it's emanating. All of this out of reflex, basically. And she finds herself with the stone in her hand with the Minute Soldier and Mobius aware of what happened. And Mobius is yeah, he's ecstatic. And he's see, I told you, you can do it. And revealed that it was actually, this whole time, a test to show that she can actually control powers, even to this extreme amount. And Corran gets mad and realizes that they won't give her an overseer, as it would restrict her powers, meaning that she wouldn't be able to time travel anymore, which is what they want to experiment with. she isn't aware of what the TVA usually does with variants, which is to kill them, as we saw with Loki. So she thinks that they're just going to experiment her, which is what they want to do because she's like special. She goes back to the TVA. She's annoyed at Mobius, but they manage to convince her that she should stay. Basically, they like gold-boss her into believing that she can still do good in the universe, and that this is her way to help people not make the same mistake as her, to cause the devastation she has, because she has, remember, like this whole thing about not thinking that she is a horrible person because she committed all these horrible acts but because horrible people were her overseers and forced her to be a bad person. So they're like, this is your way to fix the bad that you did in the universe. So just experimented on for a bit about basically like how far can you go tests with her powers. All right. And at one point she's pressed her to go further, as close to the power that she was using to revert the Power Stone earlier. And she's worried and basically like before she could only do it because it was like on reflex and she didn't realize she was doing it. But now that she's like actively trying to do it, she's like panicking and freaking out, right? And basically goes into a panic attack over being afraid that she will destroy everything if she tried to use it, which is what has happened before and which is what she's afraid of happening again. And the TVA basically ends up saying like, LMAO, no, keep going. And basically like tasers her to make her use the power, but then accidentally directs it but because she's like obviously freaking out, she doesn't want to do it, and she's doing it, she can't control it, she's not used to controlling it, and now like the TVA is forcing her and tasering her to do it. She like directs it to the wrong direction, like the power, and it ends up hitting the main power core of the TVA, and that's not good, right? That's bad, which means the TVA is losing power, which means it's losing power to control their equipment to protect the sacred timeline. And everyone's like, oh, and Corran's freaking out. She's like asking Renslayer and Mobius to like forgive her, and she's like mortified and once again traumatized. And she's like, just give me some time, I can fix this. Just give me a sec. So she's like thinking. So she ends up figuring out with some, some mechanics, scientists, whatever, that if she gets something biological with like a lot of power, like power potential to basically like become the core, it would fix the issue, right? Because the core is destroyed, they need a new core. The only problem was that there's a protective system around the core, like a force field that doesn't let any magic trespass, basically disintegrating anything magical to pass. So Renslayer and Mobius don't know how to disable this because, again, they're not controlling the TVA. It's not them. So they're just like, oh, I don't know. So Corran's like, okay, let me work something out. So she plans something else despite Mobius telling her that she broke the core. It meant that her power did trespass the force field, meaning that she could technically do it again, insinuating that she should become the core and, die. Since for some reason that somehow her power broke the force field to destroy the core, which means that she should be able to replace the core. But she is too unsure, she's too scared that she will overpower the Timekeeper's magic technology, and she's just too afraid to do it. So she's like, I'm not going to be able to do it. So she gets a brilliant idea, right? Her brilliant idea is to extract another variant of herself to use as the core instead of her. So she finds herself on Studia before the convergence, so before she escapes. So past her doesn't have the same power or knowledge as current her, basically. So she goes on Stygia. This is before she has any power. Like, she has the powers, but it's like restricted by the magic that's isolating Stygia, and she like also doesn't know about the outside world, right? And so she goes down and she interrupts her past self, who she and the TVA end up calling V3 because it's variant 3, since she's the second one, and there was that first one that had to be killed, if you remember. So this past Corran is called V3, and the Corran that's doing all this is just Corran for now, to differentiate that. And so V3 is currently doing a fighting exercise with some classmates. And when she arrives, everyone's like freaking out. Like, what the hell is this? They've obviously never seen magic before. They've never seen anything like this before. So they're like, what the hell's going on? And V3 is facing Corran, is like completely confused, since they obviously have no technology or magic. And Corran doesn't say anything. She just like knocks V3 down, just passes her out. And then she aims a sword at V3's chest, because that's what the stone is, which alleviates her power, which makes her more powerful. And basically V3 is like yelling at her to stop and trying to fight back and just saying what the hell's going on. But Corran stabs the sword right next to the stone where it would be, because remember, the stone's not there because Corran pre-convergence doesn't have the stone because it's being hidden by magic. Again, backstory stuff. So she kind of stabs where it would be, and then it like makes her take the stone out, which breaks the illusion, and it's a very painful process. So V3 is like squirming, crying, what the hell's going on? And then in the middle of it, Eslex, who used to be Scorch, but her name's changed. It's Eslex now. She tries to bite Corran because like, what the hell's going on? But before V3 can do anything, Corran plants a reset charge down and grabs V3 and teleporting out as it detonates. So that whole thing's just been reset, whatever. But she has V3. So mid-teleportation, V3's powers are activated because she's no longer under Sidra's restrictions. And in the stress of what the hell is going on, she accidentally blasts Corran in the middle of them teleporting, which causes them to spiral out of the teleportation path. Both of them tumble onto a random alien ship at an unknown time, in the middle of a bunch of soldiers, and they don't have any reset charges. So Corran starts fighting them as they attack, and V3 is really surprised and confused and terrified at what the hell is going on, because again, she has no knowledge of anything. And she just had a stone just get ripped out of her. And remember, the stone also signifies that she's the leader. And so she's like, wait, I'm the leader, what the hell's going on? Why was my stone like covered? You know what I mean? So she's trying to ask Corran what the hell's going on and why the legend of magic really exists, but Corran's just like, just fight, man, just fight. So V3's powers now exist, but if she didn't have the stone in her. So again, Sujins have the power that's like pretty small, but then if you're the air, you have the stone in you, and that makes your powers 10 times more powerful. But since the stone has been taken out of V3, she has her electromagnetism manipulation at a minimum, like if she never had the stone. So, and now that she's off Sidra, she has her powers. So she can only really shoot small blasts from her hands, produce small force fields, and like simple technology manipulation, but she doesn't know how to use these powers because she literally doesn't even know they exist properly. But V3 keeps asking Corran, like, what the hell is going on, bestie, please? And it's getting annoying, so Corran basically just groans mid-flight and teleports them out of there to like a random planet to take like a breather. And she basically explains really quickly that like long ago, Sidra was part of the universe and the realms, but after a big war they lost, and as a punishment, was isolated from everyone else. She explains that she needs to save the TVA after briefly explaining that she's the future version of V3. And V3 is like, well, interested, and she's like, what the hell is going on? I want to know what like the future is. And she's like completely ignorant about the terrible future that she ends up having, because between V3 and Corran, the time between them obviously is like the massive, backstory. So it's like she doesn't know about the horrible stuff that is about to happen to her. Corran ignores her and takes her to the area of the area that's like outside the force field that's surrounding and protecting the core of the TVA. And they're arguing about their future. V3 is like thinking that she can change her future now that she knows it's not good. And Corran gets all agitated that V3 can't change her future. She's going to die anyway. And that's when V3 realizes that she's needed as a sacrifice and gets mad at Corran. Basically, it's like mid-argument and stuff like that. So they're arguing now. And in the middle of the argument, Corran grabs V3's head and throws them both into a flashback sequence of her future, with V3 like experiencing what happens. And it plainly shows her witnessing as Sidra collapses, that she destroys it, and the pain that she feels when she's being overwhelmed, the emotion while committing genocide, and then her obeying an order from Thanos. And as the flashback, V3 is screaming and yelling, why can't I stop, blah, blah. They break out of the flashback, and V3 grabs one of Corran's swords that she placed on the ground with all the things and attacks Corran. In return, Corran starts fighting back, and they're arguing about what is happening. Corran tries to encourage her that this is a good sacrifice, and that not doing so is pointless because she would get erased either way if the TVA is destroyed. And so she explains that she's too powerful and too dangerous in the future. She's going to destroy planets and civilizations, and that this is a way to save all the planets. Basically repeating what Mobius told her to convince her to stay at the TVA, like when they were girl bossing her. But obviously it's not working. They're still fighting, and V3 uses the same argument against her, making the point that if she hasn't done all the horrible and unforgivable things in the galaxy yet, and that Corran has, so Corran should be the one that dies instead of her, because she's the one who committed all the crimes already. During the fighting, they get really close to the force field, and they're skimming the edges. V3 managed to get Corran to lose her balance and get it a little into the force field, and it begins to disintegrate Corran. But V3 gets close and convinces her to try and overcome the core's force field. Corran manages to go in and sacrifice herself to become the core, So, rip. The TVA is stable, but now V3 is all alone, and she's just kind of standing there. And she starts testing her newfound powers, but realizes they aren't nearly as powerful as what she saw Corran's was. And she quickly figures out it's this because the stone that Corran took out made her more powerful than she really was. She was already angry about how Corran was going to kill her initially, and now that she took her power, V3 is like a lot angrier. So she's contemplating what to do, and she grabs the stuff Corran left behind, which ended up just being a sword and a tempad that was supposed to take them back to the TVA. She doesn't know how to use it yet, so she accidentally goes to a random planet at a random time. And the moment she gets there, the TVA appear from their own portals to try and get her. But she manages to quickly escape using the tempad and goes back to the area in front of the core from before. So she's just hiding for a bit. And she realizes the truth that she's a variant with no place in her timeline, and that she'll be on the run forever with the TVA on her tail, which is kind of it's a bit like Sylvie about how like she's like realizes that she has no place in the timeline. Blah blah blah. She makes a plan to go to the TVA and find the timekeepers that Corran briefly mentioned when they were arguing, to demand to be part of the secret timeline. While she's there, she also decides to change her name to the Primordial, with this delusional idea that with her power that she should be a god because she's so powerful. She uses the tempad to go to the TVA, and there she fights a lot of soldiers, and she ends up spotting the open door of Renflair's office and seeing the timekeeper statue. So she breaks into the office and destroys the statues inside. And one of the quotes is just "make me a part of your story," because she wants to be a part of the timeline. She's cornered in the office, so she uses the tempad to go to the offices in the TVA, but then she's cornered again by Mobius and more Minutemen. She begins throwing like random items from the desks towards them, like lamps and files and stuff like that. She gets on a desk with an open drawer and sees random confiscated items inside, so she begins to throw those as well, seeing them as most of them are rocks. Unbeknownst to them, they were the Infinity Stones that we saw in Loki. So she grabs a few in her hand and throws them, but the Minutemen get too close, so she uses a tempad to get out of the TVA and into another remote planet location. Well, she doesn't realize that she still has one of the stones in her hand when she does this, and she doesn't realize she has it in her hand until it like reacts to not being in the TVA anymore. So it starts like glowing because it has power now, and it's the Power Stone. And then that's when she realized that it's powerful, and children can hold the stone. So she gets an idea. She puts the Infinity Stone into the empty hole in her chest where the stone that Corran took out was. The crazy idea ends up working, and the body accepts the stone and allows her powers to be enhanced. So now she's got the Power Stone in there, which makes her technically more powerful than normal Corran. B3 has taken the name Primordial, right? And in the name Primordial, the more part, she names herself Mori instead of Corran because she doesn't want to be Corran. So she spends a few hours running around to different locations and having to move again within seconds because the TVA keep catching up. Like while she's jumping time, she ends up bumping into people that keep asking her like, "Hey, are you the Reaper or are you the Quantum Star?" Which are Corran's made-up names that people know her by. And some of them are like impressed that it's her or terrified that it's her, because if she was the Reaper, it means that she's about to kill them, because that's who she was back then. And at some point she finds a location during an apocalyptic event to show, but then the TVA like don't follow her there, which means that she realizes because of that about the apocalypse floor, she learns about it. So she quickly realizes that she can't find the timekeepers unless she finds a way to get a Minuteman to tell her. So she's like figuring out how to do this plan to find the timekeepers. So during her time location jumping that she was doing just before to avoid the TVA, she remembered overhearing something about enchantments and controlling someone. So she goes back to that time, and it ends up actually being a conversation between Loki and Corran post 2012 Avengers, where Corran is at Asgard and Loki is in the prison, which is the time that which is during the time Corran visited Loki for a bit. They're talking about a certain type of magic that Loki wants to try and learn. And so Mori decides and wonders if she can do this type of magic. So she wanders the palace and ends up finding Frigga and asks her. And Frigga thinks it's like the actual Corran, so she replies just like, and turns out Mori can't actually cast enchantments since she doesn't use magic in the normal way, and that she should try and concentrate on perfecting her own magic right now, is what Frigga tells her. She has to leave anyways because the TVA catch up to try and grab her. Mori then tries to brainstorm and remembers the curse from the flashbacks that Corran gave her. So she makes a plan to try and find a way to place this curse on someone from the TVA. Since she knows basically nothing about the universe, and still being from Sidra and pre-conversion, so she knows nothing about anything, she has to find out what even is the curse. So she's teleporting all over the place to try and see if she can find Corran or any lead when she becomes interested in the Blip Memorial she stumbles across. She grabs someone randomly and asks about it, thinking it could be a memorial about genocide or something that Corran might have committed. The man is in despair, asking, "How on earth do you not know what the Blip is?" Mori gets mad and stabs him. She has the attention of the park, and she grabs someone else who stutters the answer vaguely along the lines of the Avengers, Thanos. She frowns, and she remembers seeing a tower with the word the Avengers on it. She teleports there just as the TVA arrive. So she escapes then. She breaks into this tower and she integrates Tony Stark about the Blip and Thanos. Except she accidentally teleported to 2012 New York, and so Tony doesn't know about Corran or anything yet. So she's really confused, and then she senses another Tony Stark suit near her because she can sense the technology, and she exposes the other Iron Man. So it turns out she teleported to the 2012 New York that 2025 Endgame Avengers end up going to. So she basically exposed the other Tony Stark that was there while she's interrogating the other Tony Stark. So 2025 Tony is really confused as to why Corran's here when she's supposed to be guarding the machine back in 2025, which is what happens in Endgame. And then Mori asks him about who the hell is Thanos and where is he and stuff like that. And Tony's like, how the hell do you not know? And that's when she realizes that her presence is very suspicious and that she has an Infinity Stone in her chest instead of a usual stone. So she forces him to tell her where Corran is now. So Mori teleports to 2025 at the Avengers facility where Corran is protecting the time machine. So this Corran is obviously very confused because she has no idea who this other Corran is, right? She doesn't know who Mori is. And so they fight for a bit, but Corran can't actually fight back because she's not ordered to. So she's just protecting. She's just defense fighting. Mori can't get her to tell her anything as Corran can't do anything without Clint's permission. She kind of uses Corran, who is thinking and trying to she's thinking about Clint because she can't do anything without Clint's permission. So Mori grabs Corran and teleports her using Corran's mind, which ends up taking them to Vormir where Natasha and Clint are fighting, because she teleports them to a different Clint. And she basically orders Red Skull and Natasha to stand down, and she puts a knife to Clint's throat. So she puts a knife to Clint's throat and demands that Corran tells her about the curse. She tells Clint to let Corran tell her about the curse. And she ignores him going who the hell are you and why do you look like Corran? Questions from Clint, and ends up killing him faster than Corran could overpower Mori's resistance to her power, because she is more powerful than Corran, so she's just a lot quicker. And so that basically makes her Corran's overseer, and so she immediately demands for her to tell her where and when she got the curse, as well as who gave it to her. So Corran tells her, obviously. So then Mori immediately disappears, as the TVA end up catching up just in time. But she escapes. She teleports to Corran, which is the scientist who created the curse, and fights him and quickly puts him to his knees. He's the point that she intercepts, he's about to leave for Sidra with his improved and adapted version of the technology that helped Sidran's initial defeat millions of years ago, which is the origin of the curse, and she takes it off him. So he was literally about to leave to go in and capture Corran on Sidra, but Mori has interrupted her. So she steals the technology, and she's waiting for the TVA to arrive. Quote, "You're getting slow," she's teasing them, and she tries to provoke them more by killing Corran. So the TVA quickly arrive, and she kills them off all but one, placing the curse on the one that she lets to live. And she forces them to tell her where the timekeepers are before killing them. So she figured it out. Meanwhile at the TVA, Renslayer and Mobius realize that what she's doing and the plan, and she quickly takes its person. So they also return to the moment that Corran is leaving for Sidra and take their own copy of the curse, as no other technology they own can restrain Mori's powers, even in the TVA. And so they plan to use the curse that they stole to restrain Mori. So that's all that I've got so far of Mori, who is the Corran Vene version of the TVA timeline. That's all I've got so far. I don't know what the ending will be, on how she gets interjected into the Lokiverse or anything. She has a small cameo tease at the as an end credit scene in the Multiverse of Madness, so I just have to wait and see what ends up happening to see what I do with her character, to see if she involves in Multiverse of Madness, or I've got here a potential insertion into, I think it's episode 2 or something of the Loki series, but again, it just depends on what season 2 gives and then what kind of happens. But yeah, that's what Corran's involvement in the Loki series is. There's no really involvement yet. It's just Mori, which is a Corran variant, and it's a different character who is more powerful than Corran and is very angry and evil. I guess not evil, she's just angry. She wants to be part of this timeline and she just doesn't like Corran. So, you know, thanks for watching. That might have been a bit confusing, but I hope you enjoy.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Just here to remind you to subscribe like the rest of your favourite YouTubers. I think it would be real neat if I sped run 69 million followers, just saying.